O people of Britain, know that today your citizenship is under our feet, and that the Islamic State, our country, is here to stay. And we will continue to wage jihad, break borders, and one day invade your land, where we will rule by the Sharia.
So, do you feel that you are British?
I identify myself as a Muslim. If I was born in a stable, you know, I'm not going to be a horse. If I was born in Nazi Germany, I'm not going to be a Nazi. I mean, this is just an island I was born in.
Rumaisa and Chowdhury both live in East London, which is home to one of the largest Muslim populations in the UK. In one part of town, Rumaisa and his associates have set up so-called Sharia patrols to go out and discourage behavior that they deem un-Islamic.
There's some guys there.
On this night, they stopped to talk to a couple of non-Muslim men who were in a park drinking beer, which is forbidden under Islam.
So we're just reminding the community about staying safe. And in this area, there's a lot of gambling that goes on, a lot of alcohol drinking, and it leads to a lot of problems. So we advise you, and we advise anyone you see, to stay away from these things.
Get them prostitutes off our streets!
But the patrols are not always so friendly. Online clips give a very different picture. A woman in a short skirt is abused.
Vigilante cannot dress like that in Muslim area.
We don't care if you're appalled at all.
Muslim patrols. It's Great Britain.
This we don't care. It's not so Great Britain. You need to get out of it.
A man the patrol thinks is gay is insulted.
Get out of here quicker then. You're dirty, mate. You're a gay, mate. Get out of here, mate.
In the night time it turns into a very ugly place like many of the...
Walking through London with Rumaisa, you experience an alternate reality where there is no compromise and all conversations are one-sided.
Ultimately, I want to see every single woman in this country covered from head to toe. I want to see the hand of the thief cut. I want to see adulterers stoned to death. I want to see Sharia law in Europe, and I want to see it in America as well. I believe our patrols are a means to an end.
The only thing I would say is that in America and in the United Kingdom, we have a system, democracy,
a backwards one,
but it's a system that allows the people to choose what they want and allows people freedom.
So why can't I choose Sharia? When in Rome, overthrow Caesar, implement the Sharia.
In your home, you can do whatever you want.
But what about in the public? Why can't I tell you to cover up? Am I free to say that?
Because it would be outrageous.
So where's my freedom? Where's my freedom?
You can say it to me, but
okay, so cover up, wear the hijab.
That's absurd.
The thought of Chowdhury's supporters taking the law into their own hands is deeply frightening to most British people. This is a group that believes the West is at war with Islam and that the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan justify any kind of violence in response. The most shocking example of that logic was the gruesome and very public murder of British soldier Lee Rigby on a London street last year.
We have killed this man today is because Muslims are dying daily by British soldiers.
On that day, the man wielding the knife was a known associate of Chowdhury.
Because I want to bring in somebody who is a young Muslim man who does support the idea of a caliphate created by Islamic State. His name's Abu Ramasai, and he joins us from our London newsroom. Why do you support IS?
Well, I don't think it's a question of myself just supporting the Islamic State or the Caliphate or Khalifa Ibrahim Hafidhahullah. What I can say is that Muslims, they cherish the Quran and the Sunnah, and for over 90 years we have been living without a caliphate, and many of the rules within the Quran can't be implemented. So now that we have this caliphate, I think you'll see many Muslims globally seeing it as an opportunity for the Quran to be fully realised and for justice to prevail everywhere.
Do you allow the Quran to be fully realised by murdering those who won't convert, by beheading journalists?
Well, I'd say in reply to that there are a lot of lies being pushed out by the BBC and generally the media.
So you believe it's a lie that Christians and Yazidis have been murdered by Islamic State fighters?
Well, I think it's been largely exaggerated, and I think that's been disclosed by the general media. I would say that it's the policy of the Islamic State to cater for and to protect non-Muslim citizens. It's not in their interests to massacre non-Muslims.
But they're doing it, though, aren't they? You'd agree that they're doing it?
I agree, yes, we are seeing a conflict, we are seeing people die, we are in the middle of a global war, And we are seeing people who are fighting the Islamic State, whether they're Shia, whether they're Sunni, or whether they are Christian or whatever other denomination. But I think it's very absurd to say that on one hand, that it's not allowed for people to defend themselves against brutal airstrikes being launched by America and being supported by the British. I mean, why are we not saying that British soldiers are being radicalized to go over to Iraq and Syria and to kill Muslims?
Abu,
why are they not disenfranchised?
Could I ask, were you born here? You grew up here?
Yes,
went
I was
to
born
school
here.
with people of all denominations.
Mm-hmm.
Then why do you hate them so much?
Well, as a Muslim, I would like to see Britain governed by the Sharia. That's not because I want to oppress non-Muslims, but I believe it's far superior to democracy.
But as we don't have Sharia law,
is better.
We don't have Sharia law in this country. Do you still consider yourself British?
Well, I call myself Muslim, and I don't really identify myself with British values. I'm Muslim first, second and last. And I hope one day, and I invite all non-Muslims listening to this message to embrace Islam and follow the final messenger, Muhammad. And I would as well say, don't believe many of the lies that are being pushed out about the caliphate, about Khalifa Ibrahim, because many of them are not true. I mean, we're getting a lot of conflicting reports. The other month.
All right. Abu, I'm going to bring Shiraz here in. I mean, how would you respond to that sort of message from Abu, and how many people does he speak for when he speaks like that?
Well, he represents an incredibly tiny minority of people. The difference between him and the sorts of fighters we see going out is that they're not content with sitting around in TV studios espousing these opinions. They've actually got up and gone. In many cases, we've seen women get up and go as well. So he's just really someone who's had a very long history of kind of radical activism and spouting these kinds of very inflammatory opinions, but doesn't actually walk the walk when it comes down to it. The people who are far more dangerous are the people who actually associate with men like him, who are on the peripheries of the networks that men like him activate in. So, and much younger in some
younger
cases.
and irresponsible.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, because there's so much testosterone in their blood there. And unfortunately, in traditional Islamic families, you know, moderate, nice people, they don't give an enormous amount of outlet. For example, they're not supposed to have sex before marriage. Well, it's quite difficult to get married to a divinely touched Muslim woman who is still a virgin and all of that. So promise of 72 virgins in Paris,
but what we're
does not exist
what
in
we're
the
trying
Quran.
What we're trying to get to, though, is some understanding of why some British young Muslims are listening to the IS voice and want to go over and fight there, and what can be done to stop it.
Could I just
Douglas?
quickly, I mean, of course this is a young men issue. I mean, I think Dag's chronicled every single person in the US and UK who's been convicted of terrorism-related offences in this regard in the last 15 years. The overwhelming majority are young men. Of course we're dealing with young men. But you can't then ignore the fact that for them, whether you like it or not, whether we like it or not, for them, an interpretation of Islam is the reason that they are doing this. Now, you know, for us, this is the most appalling interpretation of Islam. For Muslims, it's the worst possible interpretation of Islam. But it is an interpretation, and that's why, you know, although it's more convenient for us to pretend that this has nothing to do with Islam, we do have to accept that it does in order for Muslims and others to fight against the interpretation that people like those in ISIS, and indeed your loony guest here have, you know,
I don't think
have
anyone's
said.
denying, Douglas, that there's a misinterpretation of Islam that
Well,
people
an interpretation, well, it's a misinterpretation, not its
Fine.
interpretation.
An interpretation by a fringe group is being spread. Absolutely, no doubt, and I don't think anyone's denying that. I think the critical issue is...
Hang on, let Miriam finish her point.
I think, broadly speaking, there is an acceptance that an interpretation of Islam is being used to justify a certain politicised message. But I think the key issue here is whether or not that sort of cultural explanation is the predominant explanation. And I would say, actually, what we're looking at is what are the factors which encourage young men to get involved in any sort of crime or criminality, be that gangs or jihadism. And those factors tend to be linked to alienation, to poverty, to
if I can just very quickly,
society.
I mean, every single young person at some point in their life feels alienation,
we're
feels
not talking about feeling left
disenfranchisement.
out, Douglas.
Most people feel
We're not
left out
talking
at
about
some
the-
point,
we're not
Miriam. I
talking
mean,
about that.
most young people at some point. The
We're not
question
being
is,
talk-
what are you going to do about it? And the problem we have in this country is that there is a large echo chamber of people who want to play into that perceived set of grievances. Let me give you one very quick example.
Okay,
Western
very
foreign
quickly.
policy. We hear all the time and your loony guest here just did it. The fact that British forces have been engaged in the Middle East is a reason for radicalisation. Let me put it this way. In the 1990s, we didn't get involved in the Balkans. And then we did. I have never heard one Muslim leader in this country say how much we are grateful to NATO for intervening in the Balkans and saving Muslim lives. In other words, the West is at risk. The West is at risk of being
intervention or non-intervention,
but the West is at risk of being blamed when we intervene and when we don't.
I know,
and
what we're trying to get to now is not about intervention versus non-intervention and what the roots were, but what we do now to get out of where we are and what is the best thing to do. I mean, Lord Kerry this morning is saying if he hears those sorts of extremist views peddled, he says take away their passports, take away their British passports.
These young men.
It won't help, unfortunately.
No.
George Kerry is an excellent man, but that's not going to make a fundamental difference.
No.
So what makes the difference?
I have a huge respect for your organisation, which I think does really good work. But I think it's very worrying if we classify it as a problem of Islam, because I think that what we're seeing in Britain so much is real collaboration between different religious groups. Jews and Muslims, for example, probably are closer than they've been for a very long time in Britain. And the risk, I think, to community harmony is a very serious one. And so that's why we have to deal with some of the other problems we have in our society, which must be education, which must be poverty.
But we all want to deal with education and poverty.
Democracy.
Yes. All right. Yes. And we'll talk about what the government's plans are as well to do things within law and strengthen the law here in just a second. I want to go back to Abu and ask whether you've thought, as you don't identify with Britain or British values, whether you've thought about handing in your passport.
Well, I did give an interview recently on Channel 4, and I did make the offer of perhaps renouncing citizenship, and I think if a lot of Muslims were offered that, you'd see a huge migration of Muslims from this country to the caliphate.
No, and as soon as they got there...
No, you wouldn't.
Hang on, Miriam, address Abu directly. Why don't you think?
Sorry, well, I mean, no, you wouldn't see a mass exodus of Muslims.
Well, can I make a comeback on that?
You might
can
see,
I make a comeback
hang on, no, let Miriam make her point.
I mean,
you
might see one or two individuals, but I'm not even sure that this gentleman here would leave himself.
No. Would you leave, Abu?
Of course. I mean, if I had a safe passage to the caliphate, I'll be the first one on the plane to go to the caliphate and live there.
But why don't you?
The sad reality is that the British government are implementing oppressive policies.
Go on.
And they're arresting many Muslims at airports and preventing them from going to the caliphate. But so that is an issue that needs to be rectified.
Hang on. That's my view.
There is one important point here, which is the broader issue of whether taking away citizenship does assist in these matters. And I think the key issue is we don't actually assist the matter by pretending it's not our problem. By taking away somebody's British citizenship, what are we saying? Oh, they're not British, it's not our problem. No, we need to recognise that there are disaffected members of British society who do need to be reinserted into broader
and you've made that point very clear.
And poor white boys.
Everybody's made that point very clearly. I think the point is what you do now to try to stop it. Now, what we've seen with Islamic State, with IS, which we didn't see in the past with Al-Qaeda, is a very effective use of social media. So the message is spreading incredibly quickly. I'd like to start with you, Douglas. What do you think should happen to returning British jihadists?
Well, there's no single answer to that problem, and it's a problem which, by the way, I mean, it's worth mentioning, is not academic. The last time I was on this programme, I think probably the last time Miriam was on this programme, we were joined by a young man called Abu Rumeza, a well-known extremist around Britain, well-known for his extremist connections. He talked about how wonderful he thought the Islamic State was then. Some of us said, well, in that case, why don't you go and join them? In fact, 2 weeks ago he did, and he took his young family with him. So this is something that is happening. It's something that's going to be a problem for a long time. The reason why I say there's no single answer to it is that there are obviously going to be people who go and who are killed there, as reportedly 2 people were from Britain this week. There will be others who will want to stay there. There will be some who want to come back. And in all of that, a country like Britain has a complex set of challenges. I think the most desirable thing would be that people who have participated in very, very bloodthirsty massacres do not ever return to the UK. Either they're killed in fighting, or for some other reason they don't come back.